The purpose of this demonstration video is to provide an overview of two of the data collection tools. That's the student engagement data collection form as well as the student-teacher verbal interactions. Let's first take a look at the student engagement data collection form. Now, before I get into the form itself, I'll reiterate something that's been shared in other videos, and that is that it is important to take the time up front meeting with teachers, and again I prefer a small group setting, whether that's a grade level or department meeting, to talk about the use of each particular form. It's difficult for a teacher to be observed by an observer and to be sent this form and sit in a post-observation conference without really having a keen understanding of the purpose for this particular form. This is a very popular form. It is a bit busy at first when teachers get their eyes on it, but once they've had the opportunity to use this particular form, it's one of the more highly requested forms on the part of teachers. So whether you're a novice teacher or a veteran teacher, this particular form provides some great feedback, very specific feedback regarding student engagement data collection. Let's take a look at the directions on the form. If you'll notice the rectangle here where it says student ID and then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The student ID, sometimes in a pre-observation conference I will hand a blank copy of this form to the teacher, or perhaps in advance, and ask them to come to the conference with this observation form filled out with student names, so that when I initiate my observation in the classroom that I can easily type in the students' names. Depending on seating arrangements. Sometimes students' name tags will be on the desks as well, and that makes it much easier, particularly in elementary classrooms. Sometimes what will happen is a pre-observation conference is that we're not necessarily concerned about individual students and who students are, but what the data has to say. So it could be, or we're just typing an F in for female and an M for male, or it could be that during we've used this form a couple of times and feedback during post-observation conference and teacher realizing that there are 3 kids that he or she really wants some feedback on. So it could be that we just write those 3 names down and use gender for the others, or it could be as the case in this particular form is that based on the last observation or some feedback dialogue we've had with the teacher, that Hunter and Julian are students we want to pay close attention to, so this observer has capitalized their information here. So that's the student ID line. The activities you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, directly correspond with the squares underneath the student name. So moving from top to bottom, left to right, N1 and the first cell here represents the student's behavior, on-task or off-task behavior during the first activity, N5 during the second activity, N5 during the third activity, and so on. So as you see down below, similar to some of the other forms, we're looking at engagement and looking at on-task and off-task behavior. With the form itself, we're not typing in a whole lot of information under teacher behavior. Of course, the data collection tool will record whatever you'd like to type. So in this case, it was just a simple review of previous day's lesson. If you'd like to type in more information, as demonstrated in the email and printing video, all of that information will be captured and will print. And the same holds true for the comments box below. If you'd like to enlarge the comments box, you may do so by dragging that here. Or again, you can just simply use the scroll feature, but everything that's written inside of the comments box, everything that's captured, will be printed on a one-pager. Regarding printing, sometimes in a particular activity, an observer may want to note 2 behaviors. So in this case, we have for Aaron during the third activity, which was where the teacher led students in an activity using an eyedropper, vegetable oil, water, wax paper, etc., that the observer noted 2 behaviors. So the first behavior noted was a hands-on activity that the student was participating in, and then the observer also noted F3. So if we were to print this document, this particular cell would print wider than the others to make sure we've captured all of that information. So this, again, this particular form, when we take a look at this, one of the things that does stand out is the F3, and when you look at activity 4, from 9:37 to 9:45. It talks about the specifics of the activity in the text here, but you'll notice that nearly every student has an F3 tagged with their name. So that particular activity, when I look at engaged in off-task conversation, what happens, often in a typical classroom observation, when the administrator would bring about this information. But in this case, the administrator hasn't, or the observer does not have to do much talking, and it's very obvious to the teacher that there's an opportunity to reflect on what exactly was happening from a planning standpoint, F3, and then the lesson delivery, and what are some ways if we've got another core coming tomorrow, or if we'd like to reteach this particular lesson, how we might devise the lesson so that students are a little more engaged. Veteran teachers, it's been interesting with this particular form, all-star veteran teachers, in fact, where you have typically a large percentage of students paying attention, but maybe there are just a couple of students who are off task, and it's a great opportunity to provide feedback regarding a small percentage of students. Again, with the opportunity to help teachers grow. This is an excellent form. It can be used in a number of different ways. It can also be used to chart interactions, but the interactions, a new form was created by Dr. Michael DiPaolo and Dr. Hoy that allows a user to chart interactions. So at this time, I'll go ahead and move to that form. So let me go back and take a look at a completed copy of a student-teacher verbal interactions form. Now, one of the things you'll notice on this form, it's very similar in that we have the student ID and the cells here, but you'll notice there are no corresponding activities. So the way Dr. DiPaolo and Dr. Hoy designed this particular form, not necessarily focusing on particular activities, but really charting the interactions between students and teachers. And so our students engaging teachers, our teachers engaging students. And when we take a look at this particular form, we'll see down here at the bottom when we look at the key and the sample that's provided. So at some point this particular student, T2, and when I look at the key for T2, T stands for teacher interaction with student use T. For student interaction with teacher use S. So let's take a look at this particular form and some of the data that's been captured. So one of the things we'll see right away is that Jason, and then we go to T2. So we see that the teacher directed questions to Jason at 3 points during the lesson, and then we also see at one point that the teacher was encouraging Jason at one point during the lesson. We don't know when during the lesson unless we wanted to capture some specific information under the comments, but again, that's not the purpose for this particular form. It's been interesting using this particular form with teachers and sometimes seeing nothing but T's on the form and not really having to communicate much during a post-observation conference, and teachers right away looking at the data saying, you know what, I'm really working much harder than I need to, and he who does the most talking does the most learning. What's a way I can figure out to try and get students a little more involved, a little more engaged in my lesson? So that's some of the feedback that could take place during a post-observation conference. Taking a look at this form, it could also be used for classroom behavior. So it could be that you've got a teacher you've met with, and for goal setting purposes, classroom management is an area of professional growth this year. It could be that you've used another form for an observation, and there have been some concerns, let's say, for classroom management, and so this could be another one to provide feedback. Or it could be that there are a couple of students we've been working with, both the observer and the teacher, in trying to put in place some strategies to monitor student behavior, and so this could be an opportunity to provide feedback regarding the success of some of those particular strategies. And so in this case, you have Tracy that was off task. So at one point, really at 4 points, Tracy had to be redirected. So teacher redirecting T8 at 4 points during the lesson. So this form, again, very similar to the previous form that was just shared, but a great way to chart interactions with students and teachers during a given lesson.